Hello students, today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic of Law of Torts 1, that is civil liability for nuclear damage. To start with the introduction, the enactment of Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act in 2010 established a legal framework aimed at providing redress to the individuals affected by nuclear accidents, delineating liability allocation and outlining the prerequisite processes for compensation. The Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010 represents a notable legislative achievement in contemporary times. Legislative development is significant as it is marked the inaugural parliamentary debate on nuclear energy and its associated ramifications. The outcome yielded a liability law that had remarkable domestic political acceptance, yet deviated from customary international norms in some aspects. The act in question has generated significant symposium because of the liability worries faced by the operators and suppliers of the nuclear fuels. Suppliers in particularly have exhibited hesitancy in investing in nuclear energy due to apprehensions about the potential liability. The civil liability regime implemented in India for nuclear damage adheres to international standards and includes a distinctive provision that grants an operator the ability to seek redress against a supplier. Adopted in 1997, the Umbrella Convention on Supplementary Compensation, that is CSC, seeks to establish a minimum national compensation amount. In the event that the amount provided by the contracting parties is inadequate to compensate for the damage, public funds may be utilized to augment the amount. Now students, coming to main features of the Convention on Supplementary Compensation for Nuclear Damage, the 1997 Convention on Supplementary Compensation for Nuclear Damage aims to augment the quantity of compensation available to the victims of nuclear accidents and established a global liability regime. A state that has ratified either the Vienna Convention of 1963 or the Paris Convention of 1960 is eligible to ratify the CSC, the convention as we discussed above. An independent country that is not a part of either of these conventions can still choose to join the CSC as long as its own laws on nuclear liability are in line with both CSC and its annexures, which are an important part of the CSC. India, which is not a signatory to the Vienna or Paris Conventions, ratified CSC in 2010 and enacted domestic legislation, that is the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act. Now students, coming to the important clauses of the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010. The CLNDA imposes strict and no-fault liability on the nuclear plant operator, holding it accountable for any resulting damage irrespective of any fault on its part. In addition, it stipulates the amount the operator must pay in the event of damage, that is rupees 1500 crores, and mandates that the operator to obtain liability insurance. If the amount of damage claims exceeds rupees 1500 crores, the CLNDA anticipates the intervention from the government. The government liability is restricted to the rupees equivalent to 300 million special drawing rights SDRs, which is approximately 2100 to 2300 crores as stipulated by the Act. The CLND Act's provisions align closely with those of the CSC and its annexures with regard to the manner in which strict or absolute legal liability is transferred to the operator, the time and amount limitations on the liability, the coverage of liability through the insurance or financial security, and the definition of nuclear installation, damage and other relevant aspects. The CLND Act in fact establishes the foundation of India's accession to a suitable international liability framework like the CSC. In accordance with the Article 18 of the CSC, in the case of a contracting party that is not a signatory to either the Vienna Convention or the Paris Convention, its national law must adhere to the regulations outlined in the annexures to this convention. The operator of the nuclear installation is held culpable for any nuclear damage resulting from a nuclear incident as stipulated in subsection 4.1 of section 4. Additionally, according to section 4.4.4, the operation of this nuclear installation shall bear stringent liability in accordance with the principle of no fault liability. As required by subsection 1 of section 8, the operator of a nuclear installation must obtain liability insurance or an equivalent form of additional financial security prior to commencing of the operation of the plant. Now, let us discuss right to recourse of the operator. The operator of the nuclear installation, after paying the compensation for nuclear damage in accordance with section 6, shall have a right to recourse where the nuclear incident has resulted as a consequence of an act of the supplier or his employee, which includes the supply of equipment or material with patent or latent defects or substandard services. Following the payment of compensation for the nuclear damage as stipulated in section 6, the recourse is allowed, provided such a privilege is expressly and explicitly stipulated in a written contract, the nuclear incident transpired due to an action committed by the supplier or one of their employees. This includes the provision of the equipment or materials that contain patent or latent defects as well as substandard services. Now, the last point is the nuclear incident has transpired due to an intentional act of commission or omission by an individual that was intended to cause catastrophic nuclear damage. Now, let us do the analysis of the right to recourse. Article 10 of the annexures to the CSC addresses the circumstances described in section 17A, 17C, 17B appear to be an additional circumstance to which the right to recourse outlined in Article 10 of the annexures of CSC applies. On the contrary, the circumstances mentioned in section 17B pertain to matters and actions including service contracts and product liability stipulations and conditions. Typically, these are stipulated in a contractual agreement between the provider and the operator. Therefore, students, this provision should be interpreted in conjunction with the pertinent clause in the contractual agreement between the supplier and operator regarding the product liability. Generally, the parties to a contract specify and elucidate the scope of their respective obligations in accordance with the warranty and indemnity clauses that are customary to such agreements. The provisions of the CSC annexures, specifically Article 10 subclause A, do not impose any limitation on the contractual terms between the supplier and operator, including the agreed upon basis for the recourse. Consequently, with respect to the aforementioned, section 17 subclause B's reference to the supplier would be consistent with and not in opposition to Article 10 subclause A of the CSC annexures. Its implementation will be governed by contractual terms that the supplier and the operator have mutually agreed upon. According to section 17, the operator is entitled to a course of action, although it confers a substantial right upon the operator. This provision is merely enabling and not obligatory. To clarify more, while it does not mandate it, it allows an operator to incorporate or utilize a right to recourse into the contract. Students, despite the absence of a compulsory legal obligation to include a right of recourse in a contract under the CL&D Act, policy considerations may support the inclusion of such a provision in a risk-sharing mechanism. NPCIL, a public sector organization, would require, as a matter of policy, that the nuclear supply contracts include clauses that guarantee a recourse right in accordance with Rule 24 of the CL&D rules of 2011. The contractual negotiation positions permissible for the operator or the supplier are not delineated in Article 10 of the CSC annexures. With the purpose of facilitating negotiations between the supplier and the operator regarding a right of recourse, the India Nuclear Insurance Pool has been established as a market-based mechanism to provide a source of funds for the compensating third parties in event of nuclear damage. Students, this pool would empower the suppliers to procure insurance coverage in order to mitigate the potential for the invocation of the recourse. Now, let us discuss liabilities under other laws and if there is any limitation thereto or not. External and internal suppliers have expressed apprehensions regarding the expansive nature of section 46. Students, according to section 46 of CL&D Act, I quote, "The provisions of this shall act be in addition to and not in derogation of any other law currently in force. Therefore, nothing contained herein shall exempt the operator from any proceeding that might be instituted against such operator apart from this Act." Students, the language in section 46 of CL&D Act of 2010 is comparable to that of a number of other statutes, including the Electricity Act, the Telecom Regulatory Authority Act, the Securities Act and the Law of Torts as well. The CL&D Act channels all legal liability for nuclear damage exclusively to the operator, and section 46 does not provide a basis for bringing claims for compensation for nuclear damage under other acts. This section applies exclusively to the operator and does not extend to the supplier as confirmed by the parliamentary debates at the time of adoption of this Act. Students, Section 46 pertains solely to the available remedies against the operator. It does not absolve the operator from any other legal proceedings brought against him outside the scope of this Act, nor does it diminish the applicability of any other law currently in force in India. The phrase "in addition to" and not in derogation of should be interpreted in accordance with its ordinary clear meaning. There is no impact of Section 46 on the applicability of other laws. As a result, the operator remains subject to the regulations of other laws pertaining to subjects other than civil liability for nuclear damage. Moreover, it does not establish the foundation for litigants to seek redress in foreign tribunals. That would be contrary to the law's fundamental purpose, which is to establish a domestic legal structure through which the victims of nuclear damage may pursue reparation. The rejection of a specific amendment to include foreign tribunal jurisdiction during the adoption of CL&D bill supports this interpretation. Section 46 exclusively addresses claims against the operator, leaving the liability of the supplier under tort law as a subject of ongoing concern. Students, the aforementioned section appears to be adequately shield the providers from legal liability under tort law. The determination of how a judge might interpret this rule is challenging. The Act explicitly assigns responsibility for nuclear harm to operator. However, it also grants the operator the ability to seek compensation from supplier under specific conditions. The legislation does not explicitly prohibit a legal claim against a supplier based on carelessness resulting in fatalities, bodily harm or property damage. The current inquiry revolves mostly around the underlying purpose of the statute. To date, the courts have not addressed the legality of Section 46, rendering any discussion of its validity inconsequential. Now, concerning supplier liability clauses in nuclear transactions. Students, both domestic and international suppliers of nuclear equipment have exhibited caution in implementing nuclear agreements with India. Suppliers have encountered challenges due to two main concerns. First, the possibility of incurring unlimited liability under CL&DA and lack of clarity regarding the appropriate amount of insurance to allocate. For instance, despite the fact that such legal actions are outside the purview of the CL&DA, Section 46 of CL&DA enables those who have suffered from a nuclear disaster to pursue criminal liability against the operator or supplier for damages. Lack of comprehensive definition regarding the various categories of nuclear damage is the another concern. Now, coming to payment of compensation under CL&D Act. Students, at present Section 6 subclause 1 of the Act stipulates that the highest conceivable liability for each nuclear incident is equivalent to 300 million special drawing rights in rupees, considering that one SDR is currently worth approximately rupees 87, 300 million SDRs are worth approximately rupees 2610 lakh. According to Section 6 subclause 2 of the Act, the utmost liability of the operator is 1500 crore rupees. If the aggregate liability exceeds rupees 1500 crore, the central government will provide remaining rupees 1110 crore in accordance with Section 7 subclause 1 subclause A of the Act. Once India ratifies CSC convention, it will have access to international funds in excess of rupees 2610 crores. According to Section 7 subclause 2 of the CL&D Act, the central government may establish a nuclear liability fund by levying from operators the prescribed amount and manner of levy. The establishment of a nuclear liability fund has been a subject of deliberation for a considerable period of time. It is suggested that a small charge be levied on operators for the duration of 10 years, with the charge being proportional to the power generated from both the new and existing nuclear plants. This course of action is not anticipated to continue in the near future. Concerning the possible later expansion of the compensation provisions in the Act and how that might affect suppliers' right in relation to ongoing contracts, past cases have shown that changes to the law cannot affect the terms of a contract that was made under the law that was in effect at that point of time. Retroactive legislation that undermines the substantial vested rights of a party under a contract would not be legally upheld. The nuclear legislation in India is a topic of contention due to liability of nuclear operators and their capacity to seek compensation of the suppliers as discussed above. The liability of operators is limited to a maximum of rupees 1500 crores as discussed above based on current exchange rates, with the central government taking responsibility for any amount exceeding this level. However, in France, the nuclear operators bear a liability up to a maximum of 890 million US dollars with an additional amount determined and covered by the French government. In United States, the operators can be held liable for up to United States $13 billion for a single accident. However, the US market and legislative framework distribute this liability across a large fleet, resulting in individual operators being accountable for significantly smaller sums. Unrestricted operator liability is a frequently encountered idea, and it's customary for liability to be directed towards the operator. For example, Germany, Japan and Switzerland implemented a policy of unlimited liability for nuclear operators, but the total amount of compensation available for Germany and Switzerland was restricted to a specific value expressed in millions of special drawing rights. The extent to which these governments would have made payments exceeding the specified restrictions remain uncertain. The concept of supplier liability as distinct from the operator liability is a recurring theme in various national legislations such as Austria, Hungary, South Korea and Chile. This compilation encompasses nations where the economic feasibility of nuclear power has not been compromised. However, the presence of instances when suppliers bear unlimited obligations as outlined in globally recognized conventions or domestic laws is exceedingly rare, if not non-existent. The absence of limitations regarding compensation amounts and time limits for recourse raises concerns regarding the economic feasibility of the nuclear power. In this particular context, there are two concerns pertaining to the supplier responsibility as outlined in the CLNDT Act. Setting the liability threshold at an insufficiently low level, potentially leading to the government and taxpayer assuming the financial burden and potentially subjecting suppliers to potentially limitless responsibility, impeding investments in nuclear power and undermining the fundamental goals and objectives of the nuclear power policy. Now, let us discuss briefly about the enforcement of the Act. The legislation permits the central government to establish two entities, namely the Claims Commissioner and the Nuclear Damage Claims Commissioner through the process of notification. Once a nuclear event has been officially reported, the Commissioner will proceed to solicit applications for the purpose of collecting compensation. The central government may form a Claims Commissioner under certain circumstances. These circumstances include situations where the compensation amount is anticipated to exceed rupees 500 crore, where it is deemed necessary for the claims to be heard by the Commission rather than the Claims Commissioner, or when it is deemed to be in the public interest. Concerning the 6 nuclear power reactors in Jaitapur, Maharashtra, the nuclear power generation site boasting a capacity of 9900 megawatts has been a subject of deliberation for over a decade. Its primary objectives are to establish liability for victims of nuclear damage resulting from incidents and disasters and to provide compensation. Students, the international nuclear liability regime comprising several treaties was further fortified in the wake of the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear accident. Now coming to the conclusion, the ultimate point of disagreement among the suppliers, the government and the civil society pertains to the capacity of an individual victim or a collective group of victims affected by nuclear accident to assert a legal claim against a provider based in tort law. Section 46 of the Act provides a potential avenue for compensation when read in a harmonious manner. The provision of this legislation is supplementary to rather than conflicting with any existing laws. Furthermore, it is important to note that the Act does not grant the operator immunity from legal actions that could be initiated against them outside the scope of this legislation. The passage discusses the absence of legal provisions within the Act or any other existing legislation that would prohibit an individual from initiating legal action against the operator. Such procedures may be pursued under alternative laws that are distinct from the Act in question. Upon initial examination, it appears that the clause allows for the possibility of claims under tort law against the operator, notwithstanding the Act's objective to direct all claims for the nuclear harm towards the operator. The question that casts doubt on the underlying purpose of the legislation pertains to the admissibility of a victim's tort claim for economic damage against the operator beyond the limits of the legislation. The Act does not provide any explicit guidance on the topic, leaving the question unresolved. Section 46 of the Act pertains to claims directed towards the operator, inherently precluding the possibility of pursuing a tort action against a supplier. With this, we come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you very much for the patience listening. Have a good day.